While Trump fighting to stay awake in his meetings dominates the headlines, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development slipped under the radar as he announced a new hotline that Americans can use to report undocumented immigrants living in public housing. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. I want you to think about this for a moment. A hotline for people to use to report undocumented immigrants living in public housing. Don't worry that undocumented immigrants are already prevented from using many federal programs, including those for housing assistance. We should know by now that reality doesn't matter to the Trump administration. And I'm going to give you the hotline number so that we can make some good trouble around here. But I think it's important that we talk about the goals with this, the implications of such a hotline in this particular political climate, and the risk to marginalized groups, already at a heightened risk of abuse, harassment, and kidnapping at the hands of the government, and the cowards who are just following orders. First, though, I want you to hear this directly from Scott Turner, Donald Trump's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, who joins his cabinet meetings to talk about the successes of the Trump administration. In what exactly at HUD, by the way? In criminalizing homelessness and gutting funds for evidence-based housing services? It seems like that should be a priority, Scott, but no. It's a hotline to pile on to aid in the harassment and abuse of immigrant communities.
So at HUD, it's a different day. We're running new plays. The film was real bad when I came in, I'm gonna be honest. But we are giving the people that live in public housing the assurance that they will be safe. We also announced a new crime hotline, sir, that people that live in public housing, if they see criminal activity, if they see illegals living there, if they see drug trafficking, if you see it, if you hear it, report it. Don't be afraid. And so work with our Office of Inspector General. We've set up this crime hotline and also working with Chrissy and Department of Homeland Security, making sure that everyone that lives inside of public housing is accounted for and that they are American people. And so I say that and I emphasize that to know that we prioritize American people and American people only.
Now, he says that public housing is for Americans and that HUD prioritizes American people and American people only. But I just recently talked about the proposed cuts coming to evidence-based programs, including slashing aid for permanent supportive housing by 2/3, pushing nearly 200,000 Americans back into the streets, as estimated by experts. Does that sound like prioritizing Americans to you? Setting all of that aside for a moment, we know what this is about. Racism. Donald Trump is a lifelong racist and has recently taken to really upping the ante with his gutter racism, particularly in his recent disgusting comments against Somalis. But Scott Turner, there in that clip, joins the chorus, not just limiting the utility of these calls to protecting those who live in public housing from crime, but saying, if you see undocumented people, report it to the hotline. He is even, as Secretary of HUD, reposting conservatives praising his announcement, saying they must be purged. The goals here appear to be, number one, intimidate immigrants and create even more fear in immigrant communities. Also, deputize the worst among us to go out and harass and interrogate, or worse, people that the worst among us suspect are undocumented. This could look like Trump's fellow racists feeling emboldened to approach non-white people who live in public housing and ask whether they are documented or not, or worse. And also, we can't forget to distract the base of supporters of this administration with a racism carrot while they loot the government, stuff their pockets, pardon their elite criminal friends, and engage in endless self-dealing. While they work to convince you to hate and target your neighbor in response to your anger over rising prices, inflation, and wages simply not keeping up. They are winning the distraction game, preventing you from waking up and seeing reality for what it is. All the while, those who are most at risk are at even more risk of harm. We already know that HUD has requested that public housing agencies report on the immigration status of those living in public housing, while threatening programs that refuse to comply with revoking federal funding and eligibility, prompting experts to warn about the threat to millions of households at risk of losing access to assistance. When, and let's reference a few sources here. This first one is from the Urban Institute. Quote, "The language of this announcement suggests the directive is part of the federal administration's efforts to exclude undocumented immigrants from public benefit programs, even though this is already the case for HUD assistance and most other benefits." And this from the National Immigration Law Center. Quote, "Because undocumented immigrants are ineligible for most public benefits, and their eligibility is dictated by statute, these steps appear primarily intended to intimidate immigrants, their family members, and those who serve them. Any new verification requirement could complicate enrollment in public benefits for everyone. Before receiving public benefits, individuals already must go through eligibility verification systems, such as the SAVE process run by the Department of Homeland Security. This makes it unlikely that undocumented immigrants are receiving benefits for which they are ineligible. The administration has provided no evidence to the contrary. Additional eligibility verification steps would affect every applicant, potentially requiring the tens of millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid, SNAP, and other programs to complete additional paperwork and experience delays in receiving help. Immigrants are not the reason housing is unaffordable. No matter how many games this administration tries to play with the lives of human beings who are simply trying to survive, we cannot let them obscure this simple fact. So I'm going to say it again. Immigrants are not the reason housing is unaffordable. This administration doesn't care about the poor and working class people in this country, period, citizen or non-citizen. And the biggest risk here with this hotline is to non-white people who will inevitably have an even bigger target on their back. Only this time, those who are identified as Karens in our society will feel emboldened to harass non-white people and report them to this hotline simply for existing. We've already seen countless videos of abuses committed by ICE. And we've already seen how citizens can get abused, harassed, and detained. And I must say that any abuse at the hands of ICE is horrific and unacceptable, documented or not. Unfortunately for many people who support ICE right now, they refuse to find their empathy before their tragedy and fail to realize that it could actually be them ending up on the wrong side of all of this. Just look at this ProPublica reporting. Quote, "We found that more than 170 United States citizens have been held by immigration agents. They've been kicked, dragged, and detained for days. Americans have been dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, and shot by immigration agents. They've had their necks kneeled on. They've been held outside in the rain while in their underwear. At least 3 citizens were pregnant when agents detained them. One of those women had already had the door of her home blown off while Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem watched. About 24 Americans have said they were held for more than a day without being able to phone lawyers or loved ones." Again, you think this administration cares about you because you're documented? They have no concern with violating your rights if you stand in the way of their racist goals, period. And let's just talk about some of these abuses that have been in the headlines recently. And we know there are new ones every single day, but let's remind everyone what the goal is with this hotline. More targeted harassment of people viewed as other, painted as criminal by those with the most power in our government, including the President of the United States. We recently saw the case of a Chicago woman shot several times by ICE agents and falsely accused of ramming her vehicle into ICE agents. The case dismissed after text messages revealed that the ICE agent who shot the woman several times bragged about it to his ICE friends. Quote, "According to Reuters, records presented at the hearing showed that in a group signal chat with other agents, the agent who shot her wrote, quote, 'I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys.' In a message to another recipient, he sent a news article about the event, followed by the message, quote, 'Read it. 5 shots, 7 holes.'" Citizenship. Yes. Did they care about her and her rights? No. That was Illinois. What about Florida? An 18-year-old citizen going to work as a landscaper stopped and abused by ICE agents who told him he had no rights after he told them he was born and raised in America. And because this teen was recording, he caught this exchange between the officers.
I'm starting to resist more now. We're gonna end up shooting somebody.
Just remember, you can spell that too with a $30,000 bond.
Looks like the ICE agents in Illinois are already all over that plan, huh? The don't tread on me conservatives, where are they? Where is the outrage on behalf of this teenager who was attacked and thrown to the ground while his coworkers were tased around him, being told that he has no rights in the country that he was born in because these racist cowards profiled him before pulling him over? What about the U.S. citizens and veterans being abused by ICE? Like a U.S. citizen and Iraq war veteran in California, quote, George Reddes, a U.S. citizen and Iraq war veteran, was detained by ICE and other federal agencies for 3 days and 3 nights. During that time, he was denied access to an attorney, was not allowed to make a phone call, was not presented to a judge, and was put in an isolation cell. He missed his daughter's 3rd birthday. He was never charged with a crime. I could keep going, but it's important to note that it isn't just citizens. This harms everyone. We're told that this administration, that they're going after violent criminals, that that's their priority. But we know that most of the immigrants being arrested and abused have no criminal records. ICE is hiding out in the halls of courthouses to kidnap immigrants, attending their mandatory check-ins, doing things the quote-unquote right way. How much evidence do we need that this is not about crime, not about public safety, not about justice, but creating a white ethno-state and purging our society, to use a word from that earlier tweet that I showed you, reposted by Scott Turner, to purge our society of non-white people? This is so dangerous and horrifying that I struggle to find the words to describe it here for you, and all of the cascading effects on families across the country who are afraid to leave their homes, afraid to walk their children to school, afraid to go to the grocery store, afraid to go to work. This administration may unintentionally create an entire generation of people who are fully ACAB. And because I don't just want you to feel horrified by the abuse of citizens, I want you to fully understand the horror here for non-citizens as well. We have countless stories of families terrorized by these thugs. We recently saw a Maryland woman who has lived in the U.S. for 30 years, worked as a nurse with a work permit. She went to her regular annual immigration check-in appointment where she was told she had a removal order. She was held in detention for months while the U.S. tried to deport her back to Sierra Leone, where she had fled torture. This administration then started searching for other countries to send her, and they did, to a country she has no ties to, Ghana. Her wrists and ankles are swollen from being shackled on the flight. When she got to Ghana, she was forcibly dragged by officials and put on a bus against her will back to Sierra Leone, where she fled torture 30 years ago. And I'm putting up videos of this now, where you can see footage from different angles as people that the family believes to be representatives of the government of Ghana drag this 58-year-old woman to a bus. This woman who worked as a nurse in America, paid taxes in America, bought a home in America, is a homeowner in America, deported to a country she has no ties to, without any care or concern from the federal government, dragged back to where she tried to escape. For what reason? Racism, cruelty, dehumanization. We need to get Chris Van Hollen on this case. Now, here comes the good trouble. Given that the racists are salivating at the opportunity to report anyone who they believe looks undocumented, aka, in their view, anyone who is non-white, we have a unique contribution to make. The hotline is 1-800-347-3735. You can find it on this website. And the website says that the primary role here of this hotline is to submit allegations of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. And I really can't think of a better example of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement than our government gutting 2/3 from permanent supportive housing funds in order to shift billions of dollars to criminalizing homelessness and funding for police to dismantle encampments. I really can't think of a better example of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement than our Secretary of HUD making announcement after announcement, calling on people to report people they believe to be undocumented living in public housing, while gutting funding and sending nearly 200,000 Americans back into the streets at the start of the new year. Don't let the racists win here. If you share my concerns about these instances of fraud, waste, and abuse and mismanagement at HUD, call 1-800-347-3735 and let them know. Secretary of HUD Scott Turner's effort to amplify the targets on the backs of immigrant communities by encouraging reports of undocumented people to this hotline, while redirecting billions of dollars from permanent housing funding, will have negative ramifications across the board for citizens and non-citizens alike, and is the most prominent example of waste, abuse, and mismanagement in this current moment. Return and expand funding for Housing First, evidence-based, permanent supportive housing, and stop the waste, fraud, and abuse that is targeting people for their perceived identity. Now is your chance to share your thoughts in the comments below, or call and leave me a fewer than 3-minute voicemail at 202-656-1509, or send an email to info@thepageperspective.com. You can, and I would really appreciate it if you did, support the work that I do by becoming a channel member. Click the join button for as little as $1.99 a month. Just click that join button. It's super easy. Or you can go to patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. And if you can't support me that way, totally fine. No worries at all. You can subscribe. That's free. You can share this channel, share this video with a friend. That really helps me a lot. And as always, you can follow me on social media at Brittany Page, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads. As always, thank you so much for being here. Take care, and I will see you next time.